Hi everyone, we welcome you all to this week Tech Tuesday webinar on staffing your data governance program. Today's speakers are Mary Wilson and Radu Arslanian. Both of them are Senior Principal Advisory Services Consultants from IPS. Before we start the session, let's go through some of the housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour that includes 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in Q&A box which will be answered at the end of the presentation. All participants will be muted during the presentation. The session will be recorded and it will be available on our InfoSupport YouTube channel and Success Portal where you will be able to download the slide deck. Please feel free to submit your suggestion or feedback for this session in the post-webinar survey. The Success Portal is a microlearning platform that offers free, unlimited learning to all the registered users. This feature-rich platform helps you learn and adopt to Informatica products better. The following are few important links that you can go over later. This will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Mary and Radu. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Radu Arslanian, and I'm part of Informatica's Advisory Services Group. We focus on a number of key business strategic alignments to existing data governance tools, solution tools, and we help our customers develop the value and develop the insights on how to use these tools to solve real-world business use cases. My background is in data management, data strategy, data quality and governance, with heavy emphasis on implementing very large programs and focusing on verticals such as finance, insurance, and retail. Helping me today is Mary Wilson. She's part of the same group, another very senior practitioner with very heavy data governance background, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Well,
Mary?
Thanks, Radu. As Radu said, I'm Mary Wilson, and I'm also a member of the Informatica Professional Services Advisory Services team. And with Radu, we're responsible for assisting organizations design and implement their data governance programs. And I also have years of experience, 25 plus years in data strategy, data governance, data quality, organization design, process improvement. And again, like Radu, I have experience across multiple verticals as both a consultant and a practitioner. So I'm going to, at this point, turn the floor back over to Radu to kick us off.
So for today, we, and you'll see this in subsequent slides, we really focus a lot on trying to help customers understand data governance from a pragmatic and practical point of view, and not just theoretical, but really what is data governance? How does it work? What are the benefits? How do you get started? How do you put in place some type of governance organization that actually solves real world use cases and works with business stakeholders? This presentation has really come about from a plethora of questions that we get around how do you staff a data governance program or organization? How do you get started? What's the minimal entry point? How do you manage to be able to put together an organization that basically can solve real data governance problems with the tools you have? So we get so many of these questions, and so many different groups and customers are very curious about how have we done this in the past, what is the best way that this works, and we decided to put together a specific presentation that addresses those points. And we also addressed specific customer questions, and if we go to the next slide, we actually have specific customer questions that we get all the time, and there are a lot more than these. We try to kind of find the most common ones, group them together, and come up with something that's representative of many similar questions. So I would say the organization, what it looks like and how to get started, it's on everybody's mind. You can go to the web and you can search for these things, and you can find 2,500 different answers for every one of these questions. We're going to focus on what has been our experience and what has worked for us and our customers. and share that with you today. It's really, like I said, you can search for answers. You can get a lot of these answers, but we're going to tell you practically something that works and get you started. And I think that's very, very important for when you're trying to think of sizing, budgeting, and how to go forward with your data governance journey and with your data governance organization. As you can see from these questions, and again, there are a lot more than we deal with on a daily basis. A lot of organizations will have some of the components of what we call a data governance program organization staffing. They may not have the names that we use in this presentation. So please focus a lot more on the actual roles and responsibilities and what these people do, and find them in your organization. Thank you, Mary. We're going to use these expressions in some places in this presentation deck. So, and we also get a lot of questions about what should our customers call these data governance organizations as they grow and mature. And a lot of times, the most common definitions that we use are a center of excellence and a center of practice. As you can tell by these definitions, and we just put them here as reference, you can go on a web again and search for them and see them. But from our perspective, what is the real difference between these two is that a center of practice, very often, it's born in small lines of business or data groups or data management groups as what I would consider the initial starting point of a future center of excellence, and it's where there's a lot more thinking, discussion, and a lot of innovation, and a lot of how are we going to do this, and a lot of decisions are made around the staffing and the organization and the problems they're going to solve, and how they can put together some proof of concepts and try out different things. So to me, it's a lot more of a think tank before we go to the real center of excellence, where now we're working with very experienced people, very experienced processes. And also, very often the center of excellence will live and will become famous at the enterprise level versus a center of practice, which, again, it's the foundation and may start very small. Mary, if you want to add anything, by all means, any slide that you see that you want to add something to, please keep me honest. Thank you.
Sure, no problem, Radu. And we are going to talk a little bit more about the Center of Excellence as we go through these slides, the next few slides. So I'm sure it'll mirror what you've just said, just a little bit more detail. So
great, thank you.
Sure, no problem. Let us start by reviewing some items to consider when designing and implementing your data governance program. So we're going to talk about some high-level design concepts, and then Radu's going to come back in and talk about sizing and budgeting and those types of things that are important considerations to your organization. So one of the first decisions an organization will need to make is how they would like to organize their data governance model. And you're going to notice that there are three options: centralized, federated, and decentralized. So for today's discussion, we're going to focus on the centralized and federated models, so these two right here, bringing them together in a hybrid approach. This is also referred to, or often referred to, as a hub and spoke. So your federated, your hub, and then your centralized would be the spokes. Starting with the center, federated describes a governance model in which data standards are defined at the hub, with local domain teams having the autonomy and resources to execute these standards as appropriate for their needs. These can be nuances between business units, divisions, geographical regions, or some combination that this model can accommodate. In this hybrid approach, autonomous data domain teams and centralized data governance functions, they collaborate to meet best the needs of the entire organization. The data is decentralized, with each domain taking ownership of its own data from end to end. This means that each team can scale their own processes without impacting other teams and domains. So it provides that autonomous ability to flex as the business requires. Consumers of the data, such as data scientists, however, are likely to require data from multiple domains. So what does this mean for the organization, and how do you solve for it? Well, simply stated, the data from the different domains needs to have a higher degree of interoperability so consumers can easily incorporate a variety of data sets from across the business. And so that's where the Federated steps in and provides those data standards and standardization. So each domain must follow a set of centrally managed guidelines and standards that determine how the data will be categorized, managed, discovered, and accessed. So let's take a little deeper dive on what this could look like on our next slide. So this is really a simplified version of what we reviewed on the previous slide. And again, this hybrid approach provides a level of standardization at the center of excellence, while allowing the respective groups the autonomy to execute within their areas of responsibility, so the scope. This is considered industry best practice, especially with data mesh. However, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. If only it were that simple. Each organization needs to determine which model works best for their needs. Do not be surprised nor discouraged if you find you need to adjust based on experiences during implementation. That's not uncommon. Once your organization is aligned with the approach, you can start to build your data governance organization. And lastly, you'll notice on the bottom right, beneath the line, we introduce or refer back to the concept of the Center of Excellence, or COE, that Radu has actually spoken about previously. So we're going to take just a little bit deeper dive into what that would look like in your organization and how it could be set up. So the first thing you might notice on the top right is the pyramid. But for now, we're going to focus on the concept of the Data Governance Center of Excellence, and you can see where the line is coming and pointing down. This is a conceptual model to depict how these functional areas, data governance office, business units, and information technology, interact and collaborate. It is not intended to reflect a reporting structure where all the functions residing in the same group or department, only to emphasize there's a large degree of collaboration and interdependency across the functions. So when we talk about the data governance model, we're back to our pyramid here. It reflects the data governance model, how it's structured, keeping in mind the Center of Excellence is a consortium of functions executing as one team. From top to bottom, we start with having an executive sponsor, an executive steering committee, data governance council, the Center of Excellence, which we just discussed, and then operational working groups. To the left, you'll see that the higher levels of the pyramid are more focused on strategy, whereas the bottom are focused on operations and more tactical elements. Lastly, focusing on the right of the pyramid, you'll notice select decisions and issues roll up to higher levels for review, approval, and ratification, depending on their criticality and severity. We'll get into a bit more detail on each of these in the upcoming slides with examples of organizational structures that you can leverage within your own organization. So I'm going to pause here. Radu, anything you'd want to add?
No, not at this point.
Okay, so a little bit deeper dive with the model. We're going to talk about the group's roles and responsibilities. The groups in our model will come together in collaboration, as I said previously, with shared accountabilities and responsibilities. The frequency in which they'll meet will vary upon level and maturity of the data governance organization, meaning there may be a need to meet more frequently in the earlier stages of implementation. And from experience as a practitioner, I can say you can almost guarantee that'll happen. So let's take a deeper dive. Yeah, let's do another click down. So these are directional. Here's an executive steering committee. You can see where we are on our pyramid, right? ESC. You're going to have co-chairs. It's going to be traditionally the executive sponsor and one other person. And that's going to be up to the needs of the organization. And when I say that, it could be the CEO, it could be somebody from IT, it could be one of many people. And traditionally, these are the functional and business units that are represented. Again, this is an executive level committee. So it's either like the CFO, CDO, those types of people at the co-chair, and then their counterparts throughout, or their designee. But if they send a designee, it needs to be somebody that's going to be held accountable and is a decision maker. What you don't want to happen is for them just to take a bunch of notes and run back up to somebody else, and then you go back and forth. These are, strategic meetings that need to take place.
A couple of quick notes. I just want everyone to try and visualize the organization here. It's a guide. Don't think that all these folks have to be different. You could have an executive sponsor who is the CEO, as Mary mentioned, or is the CMO, your marketing, head of marketing. They could actually be the chair, and the CEO could be the co-chair. These top-level executive positions are often represented by the same person that actually is funding, and it has a very, very clear interest in the success of your data governance program. So they could be the same individuals, and sometimes it's helpful because they will support you and they will be part of your efforts. Thank you.
So yep, sure. Moving to the next one. At first glance, this may resemble the executive steering committee, right? Because if you come across the line with legal, marketing, finance, and such, it's the same. So you're not far off if you think that. While the representative groups are the same, as I just said, the responsibilities are distinctly different. The composition is still senior level. These are designees from the executive leadership committee, so the one above it. This team will be co-chaired by the data governance leader, and again, one co-chair. And you'll see the responsibilities and the frequency in which they meet below and what they're responsible for. So the Center of Excellence, a little bit of a deeper dive. If we reflect on the hybrid center, centralized, decentralized operating model, this represents the core data governance team that will define and assist in the execution of the federated portion of the model. So you think of the three columns, it was the one in the middle, working in collaboration with their counterparts within the lines of business, functional groups, and across regions within multinational organizations. Most likely, this will be that there will be a need for more than a single enterprise data steward and business analyst, depending upon the complexity of your organization. So while this will give you the structure and the types of roles that would sit in the Center of Excellence, it doesn't mean it's just a single individual, and that'll be defined again by the complexity of your organization and the skills and knowledge of the individuals that are sitting in these chairs. So let's pull it all together, okay? Here's a recommendation of what we're calling a phase 1 data governance organization. You can see from top to bottom, we start with the executive sponsors, executive steering committee, council, the data governance council, and into the Center of Excellence. Again, this is ring-fenced in reference to the collaboration and dependency upon one another, and is now representative of, and not representative of a reporting structure. The dashed lines show intersections across the different groups. So to go through this a little bit more sequentially, we go top to bottom, as we talked about. When we enter our Data Governance Center of Excellence, we do have information technology representation. We do have that Center of Excellence that we just talked about. We have business that mirrors some of the roles, if not all the roles that are here in the navy blue boxes. And then we also have domain, subdomain owners, which we talked about, which will have the autonomy to act within their individual domains and move the processes and business forward. And then we have data owners. And this depiction is just to say that you don't have to have your whole organization lined up across all your lines of business. Start small, start with folks that are interested, that are capable, and build from there. So this is your phase 1. And as long as you have some people sitting in each of these chairs that are knowledgeable, then you can get started with your data governance organization. So again, Radu, I'll pause to see if there's anything you'd like to add.
Sure, thank you. I think one thing worth mentioning is that as you look at your own organization, as well as, like I said, a lot of people search the web for many of these answers, you will notice that a lot of companies represent something additional in addition to what we have here, which is a dedicated data stewardship. Some of them call it council, a working group, steering committee. but it's really focused on bringing together business and data stewards. You'll see that in a lot of companies because before governance, that was all there was, and that was their first effort to try and pull something together. And they started with something that's probably at the heart of making this work, which is the steward, the business steward, and the data steward, and the enterprise data stewards. We specifically didn't represent that because to us, it just becomes more confusing. We're focusing on the data governance organization and the roles that need to support it. And that's how we put together this presentation.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, so thank you, Radu. So if you see the dotted line here between the enterprise data steward and the business steward, they will form a working group. And there was a slide that's further up earlier in the presentation that does have that listed, as well as a domain council, which would incorporate these people. Excuse me, and they would also have a working group. So we didn't do a deep dive into it, but it is mentioned above, and more information is available. And the data owners, just to highlight them, are people that are responsible for defining or approving the data definitions and such. And typically these members will be these people here will be part of your data governance council. So they'll do the approval, and then the council will do the ratification. So staffing model and getting started, Radu, over to you.
Thank you. So a lot of times customers ask us a very specific question, and that is, regardless of the org charts out there, regardless of how different companies have implemented this, what are the absolute minimum roles that I have to have in my organization? Again, initially, you could get lucky and you could have an ETL developer that's also a very good data modeler, or a good data architect that's a solution architect. They can play multiple roles and wear multiple hats, and that's wonderful if you have them and if you can find them. But really, I'm looking at specific roles that you need, and very often I don't find that overlap. I've seen it in a few places, but to me, this is really the inception point of an official data governance organization. So these, to me, are the minimum positions that will enable you to have a starting point for your data governance operating group, just to get started, just to be able to start understanding some of the business use cases that business stakeholders are struggling with, and see how you can help them with your data governance solution tools. And these are what I consider crucial to your success. So you need to have a business needs, and to me, business needs, of course, they're going to come from the line of business. They need to absolutely understand the history of their data challenges and the history of how they've been working and addressing them, because those are the ones you're going to be able to help them with. They need, a lot of times, you cannot pry them out of that groups, but you can actually start working with them and getting those use cases and seeing how you can cooperate together. They're crucial to working with other business groups to come out with something they all agree on, such as a definition of a customer or a party or a product. And to me, without them, again, you cannot be successful. They're the ones that need to work with you, bring you their challenges, and work with you to address them. The enterprise data stewards, as Mary mentioned, are very important because they're going to bring it all together. They're going to represent upstream, up the food chain, what you're trying to do, and they're going to bring together multiple business stewards from multiple data business groups to work together on definitions and workflows and solve problems together. So they're to me, those two are kind of the heart, and they're very important to have. What I would consider business or data analysts, they're the working bees that will do a lot of analysis of your data challenges, understand what sources the data is coming from, understand how they can work with the ETL developer to look at data on those sources, compare them, integrate that data, analyze the data, look for data quality issues. So they do a lot of the heavy lifting and analysis. So you absolutely need them, I would say, from day one, and this is day one. So again, a minimum list of resources. The ETL developers, a lot of companies have them, and they're very good at what they do. They have data modeling knowledge, database access, SQL background. They can actually use pretty much any, at least one or two ETL tools out there. So they can pull data from sources, tell you what the issues are just by looking at it, understand what you're trying to do, and write queries and really start analyzing in data. The data management process and capability, a lot of times we're asked, okay, we bought the tools, why aren't we successful with data governance? And this is a good example why you need to understand that there is really a process, there is a data management, there are multiple data management processes, and to support data governance, you need to have some type of data quality process, metadata capture management process, lineage capture management process, data profiling, data stewardship. There are all these processes together support and enable a successful data governance program. But without having an actual process where somebody can report a data quality issue or a definition issue and track that issue and act on it, it's very hard to be successful just with a tool. So anytime you put in place data governance, I look to have a person that can actually work with the data governance group to see what are their processes, what are their tools, and how they can leverage, and what is the synergy, how can you align these two groups so they can leverage, so data governance can leverage the other processes. So I hope there is at least one person that's going to do that. An architect and data modeler, sometimes, like I said, you get very, very lucky, and a senior ETL developer can play some of those roles. Sometimes you can't, and for you to be successful, depending on the business use cases you're starting out with, you will need to be able to create research repositories where you can put data, look at data, analyze data. So it's kind of sandboxes, if you want to call it that. And somebody has to create them, has to model test cases, has to look at how data, what are the relationships, how the data interacts, what are the data quality challenges, and try and put this all together so you can actually try out these business use cases and try the tools and see if you can help them. To me, all of this has to be supported by a data governance program lead. This is the person that represents the working group and the work being done. Initially helps with a communication plan and telling the world what's going on and how this group will help the enterprise, and basically represent to everybody upstream, up that pyramid, represent this group and the work they're doing, and look for staffing, look for funding, and bring it all together and make sure that you can mature this group. I'll pause for a second. Mary, anything to add to this?
Radu, just one point, and you might be making this in a future slide, so I apologize in advance, is don't look at this and interpret this as 7 to 8 net new full FTEs or full-time equivalents. A lot of this functionality is existing in your organization and being done currently, potentially. It just needs to be formalized. And it's not to say that you may not need some additional people. A data governance program lead may be one that you may need to go either find within the organization or bring in from outside that has some experience. But a lot of these positions exist, they just need to be formalized. And then some training or upskilling may need to occur.
No, very good point, very good point. Actually, another good point is, absolutely, I totally encourage my customers to look inside. You will have to share resources initially. you will not get a budget to go and hire 7 or 8 or 10 people. Number one. Number two, I don't recommend it. The people that you need here and the heart of this being successful are the stewards, and the stewards you cannot hire from the outside. You could hire people that claim they are stewards and they're very good at it. They don't know anything at all about your business and the business challenges, the business pain points and data pain points and the history of those pain points, and they don't know how you've been addressing those, and they cannot add value. You need to start with people in the organization. I always start with here's what a data steward does. Who is doing this in your organization today? And they may not be called stewards, but the customer tells you right away who's solving those problems and working on those challenges. So absolutely, very good point, Manny. Thank you. Okay, we get this question a lot, and back to some of Mary's earlier comments, there are many ways to model this, and we try to provide what I would consider an entry point, and really address, when you look on your left-hand side of the screen, kind of match that pyramid and understand what, how some of the roles and some of the processes map to that pyramid when it comes to every one of the groups there, starting with executive oversight and sponsorship and the executive steering committee, all the way down to the platforms and the processes that I mentioned before, the data management processes that need to support a successful data governance program. And again, a lot of these, we touched on pieces of this throughout this presentation so far. This just provides more insight at a lower level when it comes to the different processes that need to exist to support the program, and indirectly it'll point to how you're going to have to scale depending on the type of challenges you get, and this is the first place where you see things like data standards and change in issue management, access control, which are more specific now to basically solving specific business use cases, and it gives you a better idea of what you're looking at as you mature, and what are the what I would consider the key data management processes you need to have in place. Mary, anything to add?
No, not at this point.
Okay, cool. You wanna take this one, Mary?
I can take it. So lastly, what we have here is a RASIC, and it really is just, if you focus on the left with the area, it's just a simplified way of looking at your organization, right? Discovering the data, defining the data, doing application of rules to source systems, to target systems, to transformations in between. And of course, one thing that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about is measuring and monitoring the efficacy of your program, as well as your KPIs that this all should be tied to, right? When you set up a data governance organization, we have a North Star that was your initial organization, but this should all also be tied to your organization's strategic goals and objectives. And then if we go across the top and we go left to right, these are the different high-level roles that we discussed, and we just go through your typical RASIC of accountability, responsibility, informed, in those types of the activities within a RASIC. And so it's just enough to get you started, maybe explain to your organization why you need the different roles and how they would be engaged at different points within the continuum on the area on the left-hand side.
So another one of our overwhelming questions that we get is, how do I scale? What should be some of the driving factors that I should consider as I'm scaling, and how should I prepare? So let's say I start with one line of business, and I understand that I need to address some use cases, and I need to get some victories and some very well acknowledged tangible value for what I'm doing. And we try to do that with this line of business, and the world gets around, and we're successful all of a sudden. The data governance program is acknowledged, and a lot, all of a sudden 2 or 3 lines of business are approaching us and asking us for help. So as I'm scaling up and I'm getting this recognition, all of a sudden the enterprise is starting to acknowledge that we can help with specific use cases, and we're asked, okay, listen, how do we do the budgets for next year? This is the kind of work that we think you're going to have. There are 3 lines of business, each with 5 or 10 use cases and additional data sources. What are those things that will drive scaling up? And here we just try to list some of them that we consider minimum considerations. So lines of business is a key factor, because line of business, it can be marketing, it can be operations, it could be a lot of every company is organized differently. But if you have 5 lines of business and each of them all of a sudden turns around and has 10 very powerful use cases that they ask you to look at and investigate and analyze and see if you can help them, all of a sudden you're out of bandwidth. You can't respond to them. So lines of business is a key driving factor. All the time you will need to know the data sources, and you're going to need to know critical data elements, so that you can look at the data, pull the data into a sandbox, start analyzing the data, and look at how those use cases are being impacted by this data, look for data quality issues. And so that's another factor. The overall data elements, it could be more than just the key, critical data elements. It could be a lot more to make the data and the relationships work in a data model. So you will need to bring all this in. So all of a sudden you need to scale up your ETL developers, you need to scale up your architects and your data modelers. How many subject areas do you have? And again, as they scale to us, these have always been the key triggers that have impacted staffing directly. So we try to give you what we've seen in the past as guiding scaling factors and what kind of resources we would consider adding for each of those factors go up. And again, it's not a science, it's just practical experience and observation that we have seen works, and we have seen that when it's not observed can paralyze a data governance working group, so and overwhelm it. So these are things that we provide to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at how you're scaling. Thank you.
And with that, we would like to open the floor for questions.
Hi all, we have reached the Q&A part. Please post your questions so Mary and Radu can answer.
Well, if nobody's going to ask anything, was this helpful?
Okay, so for Michelle, I will read your question. Where do the data owners fit in slide 19? So not a lot of context there for me. I'm just going to give it my best shot, given the limited amount of time, unless you want to add a clarifying question. And the clarifying question is, where do they fit in the organization, or how do they interact with the balance? And with the balance of the teams. And so a data owner typically, and this is actually going to be some of the biggest decisions that your organization has to make, because there's going to be a lot of people that think that they should be a data owner, a lot of departments, if you will. And so, for example, a common one that most everybody can relate to is customer. Who owns customer? And the customer, a lot of times, is it marketing? Is it finance? Is it sales? And so those are the types of questions that you'll get. Typically, it's a senior level in the organization. We do have a link to all of the different roles and the job descriptions, if you will. But at the highest level, it really is a senior level person that's responsible for and accountable for making the decisions on the definitions, the data standards, and those types of things. So as Radu had mentioned earlier, you have working groups, and those working groups are going to come together across your different domains and across your different lines of business, especially in a multinational, and you're going to work together, the different working groups, and they're going to help to define those types of definitions, help put a recommendation forward for an ownership, and then it'll be taken to your data governance council, and they'll have that conversation, and they're going to help to start to define your business owners. So they sit throughout the business. Again, a senior level person that's going to be accountable for that data. Data owners are called out on the other slide, but not slide 19. Why? No reason, to be honest with you. Maybe an oversight or some time constraints on our side. There is a much richer, fuller deck that we can share with people that will show it in a little bit more detail, a little bit time constrained. That could be a topic, and actually has been a workshop for some of our customers on data stewardship and data ownership, to walk through what that looks like, how these different, and then you bring in the data stewards, and how these different functions interact with one another, what their roles are. And then we just map it to a real life example within your organization to jumpstart you. So there is a lot more, and there's a lot more detail and a lot more interest in this topic. Do you do a new event sharing a business case that you implemented with the principal and plan to implement? Yeah, we could do that. We'd have to anonymize it, but certainly it kind of ties back to what we talked to in the past. That wouldn't be a problem. Okay, can you have speakers answer my question, as these are not much questions? Okay, so for the one about mapping the roles to IICS from Sanofi, yeah, we can do that. Understand it was on the agenda. We didn't get to it. So we apologize for that confusion. And if you want to reach out afterwards, we can work together. And yes, I know that you're one of our biggest customers. Yeah, okay, so another one that came in is, do you have any recommendations on how to balance governance at the domain level versus the business area level? Excellent question. Ties back to what I just mentioned. It's becoming more prevalent in those types of asks, right? People are starting to work on this, and they've made progress. And that's one of my key learnings for 2022 is don't think that everybody is nascent. There's a lot of this work that's already underway, and I've said this in one of my chat responses. However, not maybe in a formalized manner. So it's getting that formalization, but more than happy to provide recommendations at a workshop level to get you started on how to balance the governance at the domain level and the business area level. Absolutely, that's something that we do. You would just need to reach out if you have a CSM. Or, I mean, our names are on the slide. You can reach out to us too. However, it's going to be on demand, so you can see the slides. But you can reach out to your CSM, and they will reach back to us, and we can get something scheduled. Okay, so I think, Sanofi, I answered your question. You should have a CSM. Just reach back to them, have them contact us, and then we can have a conversation. We talked about on-prem. Okay, how to sell to the data governance. I'm smiling. One of my favorite questions. The question is how to sell the data governance to business as usual people who see not much value in it. Wow, you talk about common, and I mean that. And so, truthfully, it's really about business, defining business use cases. And I know that sounds like a grind and it sounds mundane, but you really need to get the business users involved. And that's the trickiest part. There's no magical elixir. We don't have a magic wand that we tap people on the forehead with. That's really one of your going to be one of your hardest things to do. But you're going to bring them in. We could facilitate a workshop, and we're going to talk about pain points, and we're going to talk about what they have to do in their daily jobs that's data related. Certainly, we can't fix everything for them in your organization, but we can fix data pain points. And so we're going to focus on those, and then we're going to come up with use cases, okay, business value use cases that will tie to the technology. I mean, technology is definitely an enabler here. However, once we get those, we're going to talk. We're going to have to find business value. We're going to strike a balance between complexity and time to value, because you don't want something so complex it's going to take you 3 years to execute against, because you're going to lose people's interest once again. So we're going to do like a heat map, nothing super special, but really based on prioritization of the people in the room for the workshop, or it could be a facilitated conversation with a few people, and different for every organization. We're going to come up with those use cases. We're going to come up with a roadmap on how to execute and share the value, and then you're going to see a groundswell. And so most recently I came from Honeywell, and at first we had nobody interested, big N, big O, caps. And we started to gain some success. And we actually hold people accountable in the lines of business to come with we called them an anchor project. And some people were further along. We were giving discounts on aerospace sales that people weren't entitled to just because our customer records are so bad. And we had people that just were starting with data quality, right? Simple data quality of getting my customer master in shape. And so we came with tangible outcomes, and then they were held accountable, and we executed on them. But once we saw those small successes, it took off like a rocket. Then we had to have a demand funnel because we had so much demand for this. And so start small, think big, and then we're going to scale quickly. Happy to help there too. Okay, what else is there? Radu, anything you want to add here?
My biggest concern was how do we sell this to business as usual, as well as senior leaders, and I think use cases is the perfect example. I mean, we need where we've been successful is showing actual value, and the actual value is for a data governance suite of tools is really being able to get use cases that show where actual savings can be tracked, can be baseline, can be measured, and those are real business. They have to be business challenges, business data challenges. Where's all my privacy data? Where we don't trust our data. We have challenges with trying to recreate the lineage or understand lineage of our data. We don't understand why something works or why it gives us different answers in our analytics from one day to the other. So you have to capture those. The business has plenty of those, and sometimes they actually solve them on their own, and they can show you exactly what they're doing, and you can show them what the tools can help with. So we do a lot of that actual capturing of use cases and translating use cases into actual savings, and I think that's the most powerful thing that the business understands because it's their use cases. So you have to make it theirs. You have to show them in their own language, in their own challenges, how the tools can help, and I think that's where we've seen the most success. I've seen the mapping question. We'll handle the mapping question separately, and we'll get something out to everyone.
Hey, Radu, there's one that I think we need to hit on, if you don't mind. We're running out of time. What are your thoughts on data quality rule developer, ETL, and data quality integration developer as part of the data governance office? Should this be handled in IT or data governance? That's a huge question. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Data quality developer and DQ integration developer, data governance office. Okay, I can take a shot at that. So when we look at a data governance presentation, and the key components that make a data governance program successful are the cataloging capabilities. So you need to understand what your metadata is, where is it coming from, capture that lineage and catalog that lineage, and also what is the data quality, what are the data quality rules, and how do we capture those? So Axon being the central focal point for all these. I see it as a data quality as part of data governance. It's part of the data governance solution, and having a central repository of your data quality rules, the data quality results, and the data catalog and lineage results enables you to understand what's causing data quality issues. What are the sources? Source by source, what are the different data elements coming from and causing those issues? So I know I've seen different implementations where data quality is basically supported by IT all on its own. And depends on how complex your rules are. Your data quality rules are very, very complex rules. May not, depending on what they involve, may not all be supported by and kept and managed by Axon, but I believe the data quality should be part of your. I don't know if I call it data governance office, but your data governance working group should be able to work with the data quality group or SMEs or whatever, however you are organized to manage data quality, and they can leverage a lot of what EDC, your catalog tool captures. It's very important, and it can be leveraged by the data quality team. So but I've seen them implemented as Ed asks here, purely in IT, and with data governance being completely separate and outside of IT as a separate data management organization. So it depends. My preference is that they work and collaborate and deliver that synergy as part of one group. What was the other one that you were mentioning, Mary?
I didn't mention anything. I sure did. I didn't mention any. That was just the one.
Oh, that was another question. I'm glad a lot of folks think this was helpful. I'm very glad.
Radu, just one thing I want to add real quick is the org chart that we put up there way back that had the North Star on it. If you do, you can download these slides, by the way. They will be, as I said, not just the recording, but the slides themselves will be available. Yep. And some of the more technical detail, more technical detail is in the back that we didn't touch on with the tools. Not completely. It doesn't answer the question with mapping to IICS, so I don't want to mislead people. But that said, is that org structure is the most basic. And it's really designed to show what you need to get started. It'll grow over time, maybe not in the centralized data governance office, not that piece, but so often you go out with these elaborate org charts and people are like, I don't have 29 people, folks, and I'm not going to get 29 people. And so therefore I can't really do this. And what we're trying to depict is, and this is maybe not the best word, but how simple it can be and how you can start small. And you're going to hear us say that time and time again about starting small. And all you need is that one person on the business team that has some advocacy and has an understanding of this, and then you can get started. That's really, really as simple as it can be, and then start to fill out the rest of the boxes as you go. So we understand that it's much more complex. It can be, much more isn't the right word either. There's a complexity level, and a lot of it depends on how big your organization is, if you're multinational. I mean, there's a lot of things to take into consideration, but it's not a reason to not get started. And that's why we showed you the smaller version of the org chart. We have many versions for many customers, of course, and they do get big, but not at the onset. So I just want to be clear about that. And so we don't think that's the end-all, be-all to a data governance. And there's the whole piece of privacy that we didn't even touch on.
Yeah, I agree. And we try to provide multiple examples of, entry point, slightly more mature. It'll vary tremendously from customer to customer. I also saw the question about data governance program coordinator, and I added to Mary's response. Hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, agreed. Anybody else?
I think we've covered them with this. And again, you should pretty much, I'm looking at the list, everybody here should have a CSN that can help you contact us, and our names are, and I believe email addresses are on this slide as well. So feel free to download this, listen to it again, and shoot an email over to your CSN.
Thank you, Radu and Mary, for this amazing session. And we would like to inform that Tech Tuesday webinar will be available on Success Portal under the Resources tab, and today's webinar will be available tomorrow, where you can view the recording. And please fill in your survey, as your feedback is important to that. And with that, we will end today's webinar. Thank you all for attending. Thank you.